The chandeliers in the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Grand Gallery cast a golden glow over Manhattan's elite. Investment banker Robert Caldwell stood among them, champagne flute in hand, surveying the charity auction with practiced detachment. 20 years of building his fortune had taught him the value of appearing unimpressed, even as millions changed hands for art and antiquities around him. His company, Caldwell Financial, had become a Wall Street powerhouse through his singular focus and ruthless decision-making. Tonight was merely another opportunity to solidify connections with New York's wealthy donor class, another business function, nothing more, until he saw it. The vintage pocket watch glinted under the spotlights, held carefully in the hands of a young man across the room. Robert froze, his drink halfway to his lips. The timepiece was unmistakable, platinum case with hand-engraved initials, the distinctive dent near the crown from when his own father had dropped it during a fishing trip at their lake house in the Adirondacks. It was the Caldwell family heirloom, passed through 5 generations before Robert had placed it on a kitchen table in a small Brooklyn apartment and walked away forever. The young man holding it couldn't have been more than 25. He stood, tall with confident posture, engaged in conversation with the museum's curator. There was something in his mannerisms, the tilt of his head when he listened, that struck Robert with uncomfortable familiarity. Impressive turnout, isn't it? The voice belonged to Senator James Harrison, one of Robert's most valuable political connections. Though I hear you've been distracted lately. Trouble at the company? Robert composed himself. Nothing I can't handle. Who's that young man speaking with Diana Whitmore? The senator followed his gaze. That's Ethan Mitchell. Brilliant. Young attorney with Hanson & Brooks. They've been making quite a name for themselves taking on financial institutions. Harrison's eyebrow raised slightly. Including yours, I believe. Robert felt a chill that had nothing to do with the museum's air conditioning. Hanson & Brooks had recently filed a class action lawsuit against several Wall Street firms, Caldwell Financial among them. The suit alleged systematic manipulation of mortgage-backed securities that had devastated thousands of middle-class investors. Excuse me, Robert murmured, moving across the room as if drawn by an invisible thread. Ethan Mitchell didn't notice Robert's approach at first. He was engrossed in explaining something to the curator, who nodded with appreciation. It's been in my family for generations, Ethan was saying. My mother always told me it represented resilience and honesty, values worth more than its monetary value. Robert cleared his throat. An interesting piece. Ethan turned, his dark eyes meeting Robert's blue ones. For a moment, neither spoke. There was no recognition in the younger man's gaze, but something passed between them, an inexplicable current of connection that made Robert's practiced smile falter. Mr. Caldwell, Ethan said finally, extending his hand, I've read about you. Your reputation precedes you. The tone was polite but cool. Robert couldn't help noticing how much Ethan resembled Catherine, the same strong jawline, the same intensity of focus. Catherine Maxwell had been a talented graphic designer when they'd met, her creativity and warmth melting the ambitious young banker's reserved exterior. For nearly 2 years, they'd built a life together in that Brooklyn apartment. Until she told him about the pregnancy. That watch, Robert said, ignoring the implied criticism in Ethan's tone. May I? After a moment's hesitation, Ethan handed it over. Robert turned it in his hands, feeling its familiar weight. He pressed the crown, and the case sprang open, to reveal the watch face and an inscription he knew by heart. Time reveals truth. Choose wisely. Did you know, Robert said quietly, that these movements were handcrafted in Geneva? Only 50 were ever made with this particular complication. I know everything about this watch, Ethan replied, a hint of defensiveness entering his voice. My mother made sure of that. Robert snapped the case shut and returned it. There, fingers brushed during the exchange, and Robert pulled back too quickly. Your mother must be a remarkable woman. She is. She raised me alone while building her own graphic design business from nothing. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. She never needed anyone else. The words landed like precise blows. Before Robert could respond, a waiter approached with fresh champagne. As Ethan reached for a glass, his sleeve pulled back to reveal a small birthmark on his wrist, a distinctive crescent shape. Robert had the same mark in the same place. The room suddenly felt airless. Robert excused himself and retreated to the men's room, splashing cold water on his face. In the mirror, his reflection showed a successful man at the height of his powers, immaculately tailored suit, silver threading through his dark hair, the confidence of wealth evident in his bearing. But his eyes held something new, fear. 20 years ago, he'd convinced himself that leaving was the only option. A child would have derailed everything he'd worked for, tied him to a life of compromise and limitation. Catherine had been heartbroken, but proud, refusing to beg him to stay. "We'll be fine without you," she'd said, "but you won't be fine without us, you just don't know it yet." He'd left the watch, his most precious possession, behind. "Keep it, or don't," he'd told her coldly. "It changes nothing. I won't be back." Now standing in the opulent museum bathroom, those words echoed back at him. He hadn't even asked if the baby was a boy or girl. He'd never sought to know the child's name. He'd simply built his fortress of success, insulating himself from consequences and connections alike. When Robert returned to the gallery, Ethan was gone. "He left just after you did," Senator Harrison informed him. "Interesting young man. His firm is making quite a stir with this class action. Word is, he's personally driving the investigation into your company's trading practices." Robert barely heard him. He needed to know more. "Senator, does your office have any connections at Hanson & Brooks?" "Several," Harrison confirmed. "Why do you ask?" "I'd like to arrange a meeting with Mr. Mitchell. Perhaps we can discuss a settlement." Harrison's political instincts sensed the undercurrents. "Robert, is there something personal about this case I should know about?" "No," Robert lied smoothly. "Just good business to resolve these matters quietly." But as his driver took him back to his Tribeca penthouse that night, Robert couldn't shake the image of that watch in Ethan's hands, or the birthmark, or the echo of words spoken 2 decades ago in a Brooklyn apartment. The next morning, Robert's assistant delivered a file on Ethan Mitchell. Harvard Law School, graduated with honors, known for his principled approach and unwavering ethical standards. Currently living in a modest apartment in Park Slope, Brooklyn, just blocks from where Robert had once lived with Catherine. There was also an address for Catherine Maxwell Design Studio in Soho. According to the file, she had built a respected boutique agency specializing in non-profit branding. Never married. No other children. Robert stared at the phone for nearly an hour before dialing the number. When Catherine answered, her voice was exactly as he remembered, warm with an underlying strength that had once anchored him. Catherine Maxwell Design. Robert's practiced eloquence abandoned him. He hung up without speaking. That evening, as rain battered the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, Robert opened his safe and removed a small leather box. Inside was another watch, not as valuable as the family heirloom, but significant in its own way. Catherine had given it to him on their first anniversary, engraved with words that now seemed prophetic, "For the man who has everything but time." As lightning illuminated the Manhattan skyline, Robert made a decision. He would face what he had spent 20 years running from. But first, he needed to understand exactly what kind of man his son had become, and why Ethan Mitchell and his firm had targeted Caldwell Financial specifically. What Robert didn't know was that across the city in a Brooklyn apartment, much like the one he'd abandoned years ago, Ethan Mitchell was on the phone with his mother, describing a strange encounter with the infamous Robert Caldwell. There was something weird about how he looked at the watch, Mom, almost like he recognized it. In her Soho studio, surrounded by design awards and photographs of her son growing up, Catherine Maxwell closed her eyes. She had always known this day might come. She had just never prepared for how it would feel. "Ethan," she said carefully, "there's something I need to tell you about that watch. And about Robert Caldwell." The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Catherine Maxwell's Soho design studio, illuminating decades of award-winning work that lined the walls. At 53, Catherine had maintained the creative spirit that had once captivated Robert Caldwell. though silver now threaded through her chestnut hair, and determination had carved subtle lines around her eyes. I always knew this conversation would come, she said, motioning for Ethan to sit on the leather couch in her office. I just hoped I'd be ready when it did. Ethan remained standing, the pocket watch clutched in his hand. 25 years, Mom. 25 years of half-answers about who my father was. His voice wasn't accusatory, they'd always been too close for that, but the hurt was unmistakable. And now you're telling me it's Robert Caldwell? The same. Robert Caldwell, our firm is investigating. Catherine nodded slowly. Life has a strange sense of timing. Did you know? Ethan asked. When we took on this case, did you know I'd be going up against my own father? I suspected, she admitted. The firm announced the lawsuit against several Wall Street institutions, including Caldwell Financial. I considered telling you then, but, she hesitated, you were so passionate about holding these companies accountable, I didn't want to complicate that. Ethan paced the room, his mind racing through implications. This creates a massive conflict of interest. I'll have to recuse myself from the case. He stopped abruptly. Wait, does he know who I am? I don't think so, Catherine replied. He walked away before you were born. He made it very clear he wanted no part of being a father. She reached for a leather portfolio on her desk. But there's something else you should know. From the portfolio, she extracted a yellowed envelope. This arrived about 3 years after he left. No return address, but I recognized his handwriting. Ethan took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a single page, the elegant script, unmistakably from another era, before digital communication had replaced the intimacy of handwritten words. Catherine, words fail to express my regret. Not a day passes that I don't question my decision. The success I've achieved feels hollow without you both. I've drafted this letter a dozen times, but shame and pride have kept me from sending it. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed you to know. Leaving was my greatest mistake, Robert. You never told me about this, Ethan said quietly. Catherine's eyes glistened. What good would it have done? He never actually sent it. No return. Address, no contact information. Just words on paper that arrived years too late. She took a deep breath. You were thriving, Ethan. Happy, confident, excelling at everything you tried. I didn't want to introduce confusion or false hope. Ethan carefully refolded the letter. And now? Why tell me now? Because you're not a child anymore. Because you have a right to decide what this means for you. She paused. And because the universe seems determined to bring you two together, one way or another. Across Manhattan, Robert Caldwell sat in his corner office overlooking the financial district. The class action lawsuit documents spread across his desk told a damning story, one of technical legality but moral bankruptcy. His company had exploited regulatory loopholes to create investment products virtually guaranteed to fail, while selling them to unsuspecting pension funds and individual investors. It was all technically legal. His lawyers had assured him of that, but seeing the details assembled by Hansen and Brooks by his own son forced Robert to confront the human cost of his success for the first time. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Caldwell, Victor Harrington is here. Victor had been Robert's right-hand man for 15 years, brilliant, ruthless, and unwaveringly loyal, or so Robert had always believed. We need to discuss containment strategies, Victor said without preamble, settling his imposing frame into the chair opposite Robert's desk. At 57, Victor was a decade older than Robert, with cold eyes that had witnessed decades of Wall Street's darkest dealings. I'm considering settlement, Robert replied, watching Victor's reaction. Carefully, Victor's expression hardened. Absolutely not. It would be perceived as an admission of guilt. He leaned forward. Besides, I have something that might help us turn the tables on young Mr. Mitchell. Robert tensed. What do you mean? Victor produced a manila folder. Our investigators have been looking into the legal team at Hansen and Brooks. Seems Mr. Mitchell has been making quite a few visits to a certain address in Soho, a design studio owned by a Catherine Maxwell. Robert's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly. And, Victor continued with a predatory smile, Records show that this Catherine Maxwell is his mother. Single mother, never married. The timing is interesting. She was apparently in a relationship with someone from the financial sector around the time of Mitchell's conception. He slid a photograph across the desk, Ethan and Catherine laughing together outside her studio. The resemblance to you is quite striking, wouldn't you say? Robert's mind raced. Victor clearly suspected, but didn't know for certain. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Mr. Mitchell may have a personal vendetta driving this lawsuit. That's grounds for having him removed from the case, possibly disciplined by the Bar Association. Victor's smile widened. Unless, of course, there's something you'd like to tell me. Robert maintained his poker face. Gather whatever information you have. I'll consider our options. After Victor left, Robert stood at his window, looking down at the tiny figures moving along Wall Street. For the first time, his empire felt like a prison rather than an achievement. His phone rang, Senator Harrison returning his call. "I've arranged that meeting you wanted," Harrison said. "Mitchell agreed to a preliminary settlement discussion tomorrow at 2 p.m. He's bringing his senior partner, but no one else." Robert thanked him and hung up, his heart pounding with an unfamiliar anxiety. In less than 24 hours, he would sit across from his son in an official capacity, the son whose existence he'd spent 25 years pretending didn't matter. That evening, as Robert's driver took him home through rain-slicked streets, he directed the car to Brooklyn instead. "Park Slope," he instructed. "I'll text you the exact address." The brownstone where he had lived with Catherine still stood, though now renovated like most of the neighborhood. Robert stood on the sidewalk in the rain, remembering the cramped, walk-up apartment they had shared. Catherine's art supplies scattered everywhere. The way sunlight would flood the bedroom on Sunday mornings, the sound of her laughter. A young couple hurried past with a stroller, the father shielding his family from the rain with an umbrella. Robert watched them with a hollowness in his chest he couldn't name. Back in his Tribeca penthouse, Robert poured himself a whiskey and opened his laptop. He navigated to Catherine Maxwell Design's website. Her work was extraordinary, innovative yet accessible, exactly like Catherine herself. The About page showed her smiling alongside her team. No mention of personal life, no photographs of Ethan. He clicked through to Ethan's professional profile. At Hanson & Brooks, Harvard undergrad, then Harvard Law, editor of the Law Review, pro bono work representing tenants against predatory landlords. A rising star known for his integrity and brilliance. Everything Robert might have hoped for in a son, had he allowed himself to hope. Meanwhile, in his Brooklyn apartment, Ethan stared at his case notes on Caldwell Financial, seeing them through new eyes. The evidence was substantial. Internal emails showing executives joking about sucker investors, risk assessments buried to prevent client awareness, compliance warnings ignored. His phone rang. It was Jessica Barnes, his colleague and closest friend at the firm. "You okay?" she asked without preamble. "You left the office without saying anything. That's not like you." Ethan sighed. "It's complicated, Jess. Really complicated." "Does this have something to do with the Caldwell meeting tomorrow?" "Davis said you tried to recuse yourself, then changed your mind." "I can't get into it right now," Ethan replied, "but I need you to do something for me. That source who's been feeding us information from inside Caldwell Financial, can you find out who it is?" "Why?" Jessica sounded concerned. "We promised anonymity." "I know, I need to know if it's Victor Harrington." There was a pause. "How do you know that name?" Ethan's suspicions crystallized. "So it is him." "Ethan, what's going on?" "Harrington's information has been solid. Without him, we wouldn't have half our case." "That's what worries me," Ethan said. "I think we're being used, but I don't know why." After hanging up, Ethan retrieved the pocket watch from his nightstand, opening it to read the inscription once more. "Time reveals truth. Choose wisely." His mother had always told him the watch represented their family's resilience. Now he wondered what truths time was about to reveal. The next morning, Catherine arrived at his apartment unannounced, concern evident in her expression. "You're going through with the meeting?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I have to. Be careful," she warned. Robert Caldwell didn't become who he is by being sentimental. If he suspects who you are, he might already know, Ethan interrupted. And you should know that Victor Harrington has been our inside source on this case. Catherine's face paled. Victor? That's not possible. You know him. She sank onto Ethan's couch. He was Robert's deputy even back then. Coldest man I ever met. He hated me, thought I was a distraction from Robert's ambitions. She looked up at her son. If Victor Harrington is involved, this isn't about justice. He's using you for something else entirely. At precisely 2 p.m., Ethan and his senior partner, William Davis, were escorted into Caldwell Financial's executive conference room. The space exuded power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, a massive table of polished walnut, and artwork worth millions adorning the walls. Robert Caldwell stood as they entered, his expression giving nothing away. Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Davis, thank you for coming. For 25 years, Ethan had wondered about the man who had contributed to his existence. Now facing him as an adversary rather than a son, he felt an unexpected confusion of emotions. Curiosity, anger, and something deeper he couldn't name. Mr. Caldwell, Ethan replied with professional detachment, I believe you have a settlement to propose. Neither man acknowledged what they both now suspected, that they were bound by something far more complicated than a lawsuit. As they took their seats, the tension in the room was palpable. What none of them noticed was Victor Harrington, watching through the glass wall of an adjacent office, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. The first phase of his plan was proceeding perfectly. The Caldwell Financial Conference Room felt smaller than its generous dimensions as Robert and Ethan sized each other up across the polished walnut table. William Davis, Ethan's senior partner, broke the silence first. Mr. Caldwell, we appreciate your willingness to discuss settlement options, but I should be clear. Our evidence is substantial. Any agreement would need to reflect the gravity of the allegations. Robert nodded, his eyes never leaving Ethan's face. I understand, that's why I've prepared this. He slid a document folder across the table. A proposed settlement of $750 million to be distributed to affected investors, plus substantial corporate governance reforms. Davis couldn't hide his surprise. That's considerably more than we expected at this stage. I believe in addressing problems directly, Robert replied, but I'd like to discuss the details with Mr. Mitchell alone, if you don't mind giving us the room. Davis glanced at Ethan, who gave a slight nod. I'll be right outside if you need me, Davis said, collecting his briefcase. When the door closed, father and son regarded each other in tense silence. The watch, Robert finally said. May I see it again? Ethan hesitated before withdrawing, the timepiece from his pocket. He placed it on the table between them. Catherine kept it all these years, Robert observed quietly. She kept a lot of things, Ethan replied. Her dignity, her integrity, her promise to raise me with values. Robert met his gaze directly. You know who I am to you. I know who you were supposed to be, Ethan corrected. A father, someone who stayed, someone who cared. Robert's composure slipped slightly. I was 27, obsessed with becoming successful. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me. He gestured around the opulent room. I built all this instead. Congratulations, Ethan said coldly. I'm ethically obligated to recuse myself from this case now, but the firm will continue without me. The settlement offer is genuine, Robert insisted, regardless of our situation. Ethan stood abruptly. Our situation? You mean the fact that you abandoned your pregnant girlfriend because a child didn't fit into your 5-year plan? Or that you spent 25 years building a company that profits from exploiting people's financial trust? Robert's expression hardened. You've made your judgment without hearing my side. What side could possibly justify walking away from your own child? Ethan demanded, years of unacknowledged pain surfacing. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up without a father? Having Mum work herself to exhaustion to give me opportunities. Watching other kids with their dads at baseball games and school events? I can't change the past, Robert said quietly. No, you can't, but I need to understand something. Ethan leaned forward. Did you know who I was when we met at the gallery." Before Robert could answer, the door opened. Victor Harrington entered, without knocking, his timing suspiciously perfect. "Robert, there's an urgent matter." He stopped, feigning surprise at the tension he'd interrupted. "I apologize, I didn't realize you were still in discussion." Robert's jaw tightened. "We're nearly finished. I'll be with you shortly, Victor." But Victor made no move to leave. "Actually, this concerns Mr. Mitchell as well." His eyes gleamed with calculated malice. "Our legal team has discovered some troubling information about Hansen and Brooks's handling of this case, specifically about Mr. Mitchell's personal connection to Caldwell Financial." Ethan's blood ran cold. He'd suspected Victor was playing a deeper game, but hadn't anticipated a direct confrontation. "What are you talking about?" Robert demanded. Victor produced a file. "Mr. Mitchell has been pursuing this case while concealing a significant conflict of interest." He turned to Ethan with a predatory smile. "Isn't that right? You've known for some time about your biological relationship to Robert." The accusation hung in the air. Robert's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization that Victor knew the truth. "That's why you've been feeding information to Hansen and Brooks," Ethan said, comprehension clicking into place. "You wanted me on this case." Victor's smile didn't waver. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "You've been our anonymous source," Ethan continued. "The question is why? What do you gain by undermining your own company?" Robert turned to Victor, decades of trust crumbling. "Is this true?" For a moment, Victor's mask slipped, revealing cold calculation. "Robert, surely you aren't taking the word of this opportunist over mine? I've been by your side for 15 years. Answer the question," Robert insisted. "Have you been passing information to Hansen and Brooks?" The conference room door opened again as William Davis returned, concerned by the raised voices. "Ethan, what's going on?" Victor seized the opportunity. "Perfect timing, Mr. Davis. I was just explaining that your associate has been pursuing a vendetta against Caldwell Financial based on personal grievances rather than legal merit." He handed Davis another file. "These documents prove that Ethan Mitchell is Robert Caldwell's biological son, a fact he deliberately concealed while building this case." Davis looked stunned. "Ethan, is this true?" "I only learned about it yesterday," Ethan replied, maintaining his composure despite the ambush. "I was planning to recuse myself after this meeting." "How convenient," Victor sneered. "Unfortunately, the ethical breach has already occurred. Your entire case is now compromised." Robert had heard enough. "That's not your call to make, Victor." He turned to Davis. "The settlement offer stands. $750 million plus governance reforms. Victor's allegations about Ethan's motives don't change the substance of your case." Victor's expression hardened. "Robert, you can't be serious. This is clearly extortion." "It's accountability," Robert interrupted, surprising everyone in the room, including himself. "The documents are authentic. We both know it." He faced Davis again. "I'll have my team draw up the formal agreement. No need to involve the court system further." Victor slammed his hand on the table. "This is absolutely unacceptable. The board will never approve." "The board answers to me," Robert cut in coldly. "And after today, Victor, you answer to no one at this company. You're fired." The room fell silent. Victor's face contorted with rage. "You're making a catastrophic mistake. I know where all the bodies are buried, Robert. Metaphorically speaking, of course." "Get out," Robert said quietly. "Security will escort you from the building." After Victor stormed out, Davis cleared his throat. "Given the unusual circumstances, I think I should review this settlement proposal with our full team. Ethan, we'll discuss your status on the case back at the office." When Davis left, Robert and Ethan found themselves alone again, the air thick with unresolved tension. "Why did you do that?" Ethan asked. "Fire Victor. Stand by the settlement." Robert considered his words carefully. "Because he was wrong. And you were right." He paused. "And because I've spent 25 years making decisions based solely on what benefits me. Maybe it's time I considered what's right instead." Ethan wasn't ready to accept such a simple conversion. "So that's it? One conversation and you're suddenly concerned with ethics?" No, Robert admitted. It started the moment I saw you with that watch, and it will take more than words to prove I mean it. He hesitated. I don't expect forgiveness, Ethan. I don't even expect you to want me in your life, but I would like the chance to at least try to make amends. Ethan stood, reclaiming the pocket watch from the table. I need time to process all this, and I need to understand what Victor was really after. I intend to find out, Robert assured him. Whatever his game is, it's not over. As Ethan reached the door, Robert spoke again. For what it's worth, and I know it's worth very little, I've thought about you every day for 25 years. I just didn't have the courage to find out who you'd become. Ethan paused without turning around. Now you know. Later that evening, Ethan sat in his Brooklyn apartment, the events of the day replaying in his mind. His phone had been buzzing, with messages from Davis and other partners, but he'd ignored them all. The only call he'd answered was from his mother. Victor confronted us, he explained to Catherine. He tried to discredit me by exposing that Robert is my father. That sounds like Victor, Catherine replied grimly. He always played the long game. What did Robert do? That's the strangest part, Ethan said. He fired Victor on the spot and upheld the settlement offer. $750 million plus reforms. It's more than we expected to get even after a trial. There was a thoughtful silence on the line. 25 years is a long time, Ethan. People can change. Or they can become better at hiding who they really are, Ethan countered. That's possible too, Catherine acknowledged. What are you going to do now? Ethan sighed. I don't know. The firm will probably remove me from the case either way. Beyond that, he trailed off. Just be careful, Catherine warned. Victor Harrington isn't someone who accepts defeat gracefully. After hanging up, Ethan's doorbell rang. He opened it to find Jessica Barnes holding a large file box. You're not answering your phone, she said, pushing past him into the apartment. The entire firm is buzzing about what happened at Caldwell Financial. I can imagine, Ethan replied, closing the door. Jessica set the box down on his coffee table. This is everything we have on Victor Harrington. Since you were right about him being our source, I thought you might want to know what else he's been up to. Ethan raised an eyebrow. How did you get personnel files from Caldwell Financial? I didn't, Jessica replied. These are SEC investigation records that never made it to prosecution. My contact at the Justice Department owed me a favor. She opened the box. Harrington has been playing a very sophisticated game for years. He's been systematically hiding losses, manipulating reports and setting up Robert Caldwell to take the fall. Ethan spent the next few hours sorting through evidence of Victor's elaborate scheme. The picture that emerged was disturbing. Victor had been engineering Caldwell Financial's most questionable practices, while carefully documenting Robert's technical accountability as CEO. Simultaneously, he'd been positioning himself to take control of the company once Robert was forced out. The lawsuit was just one piece, Ethan murmured. He needed me to make it personal, to ensure Robert would fight rather than settle, damaging the company further. Until Robert surprised everyone by settling anyway, Jessica said, and firing him. Ethan nodded slowly, which means Victor's backup plan is already in motion. Meanwhile, across town, Robert Caldwell worked late in his office, systematically reviewing years of company decisions with fresh eyes. The more he examined, the clearer Victor's manipulation became. Robert had been so focused on growth and competition that he'd become blind to the ethical compromises being made in his name. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Roof, now, come alone. Robert hesitated only briefly before taking the elevator to the top floor. The night air was crisp as he stepped onto the rooftop garden that crowned the Caldwell Financial building. City lights sparkled below, a testament to the power concentrated in Manhattan's towers. I was beginning to think you wouldn't come. Victor emerged from the shadows, his expression unreadable. You've been systematically undermining my company while setting me up to take the blame, Robert said evenly. I want to understand why. Victor laughed without humor. Why? Because you never deserved any of this. 20 years I've watched you take credit for my strategies, my innovations. 20 years of being the brilliant mind behind the throne. His eyes hardened. And then, there was Catherine. Robert tensed. What does Catherine have to do with this? Everything, Victor spat. Before she came along, you were focused, ruthless, a man with real potential. Then suddenly you were talking about balance, about ethics, about what really matters in life. His disgust was palpable. When she got pregnant, I thought you'd finally come to your senses by leaving, but you were never the same. Always holding back, always with that look of regret. So this elaborate scheme was what? Revenge because I loved someone, Robert asked incredulously. It was justice, Victor corrected. I removed your distractions and rebuilt this company into what it should have been all along. And now I'm taking what I earned. Robert stepped closer. How? You're fired, Victor. It's over. Victor's smile was chilling. Is it? The board meets tomorrow morning to review evidence I've compiled showing your direct involvement in systematic fraud. Your noble settlement today will be seen as an attempt to cover your tracks. Meanwhile, I've already accepted a position with your largest competitor, taking our best clients with me. You won't succeed, Robert stated firmly. I already have, Victor replied. The only question remaining is what happens to your son now that he's exposed himself as your illegitimate heir pursuing a vendetta. Robert's fists clenched at the threat. Leave Ethan out of this. Too late, Victor said, his voice cold as the night air. By tomorrow afternoon, his career will be in shambles. The Bar Association takes ethics violations quite seriously. He stepped closer. Unless, of course, you're willing to negotiate. What do you want? Robert demanded. Resign immediately. Public statement admitting personal responsibility for all questionable practices. No mention of me whatsoever. Victor's eyes gleamed with triumph. In exchange, I'll ensure the evidence against your son mysteriously disappears. Robert struggled to maintain his composure. You've been planning this for years. Since the day you walked away from Catherine, Victor confirmed. I knew eventually you'd show weakness. Finding out about your son just accelerated my timeline. He checked his watch. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to decide. Resignation letter on the board chairman's desk, or I destroy you both. After Victor left, Robert remained on the rooftop, the cold wind matching the chill in his veins. For 25 years, he'd believed he was in control of his company, his destiny, his choices. Now he saw the truth. His greatest mistake had spawned consequences beyond imagining, and the price would be paid not just by him, but by the son he'd never known and the woman he'd never stopped loving. His phone rang, Ethan's number. Robert answered, his voice rough with emotion. Victor just left, Ethan said without preamble. He came to my apartment, offered to bury the evidence against me if I testify against you. Robert closed his eyes. He made me the same offer in reverse. There was a long silence. We need to talk, Ethan finally said. All three of us. All three? You, me, and Mom, Ethan replied. Victor doesn't just want your company. He wants to destroy everything you care about, including us. An hour later, Robert's town car pulled up outside Catherine's brownstone in Park Slope. She had purchased it years ago when her design business had finally taken off, a symbol of her success and independence. Robert sat in the car, staring at the warm light spilling from her windows, summoning courage he'd never needed in corporate boardrooms. When he finally knocked, Catherine opened the door herself. 25 years had only enhanced her beauty, adding character and wisdom to features he'd once traced with reverent fingers. Catherine, he managed, suddenly lost for words. You're late, she said simply. 25 years late. But she stepped aside to let him in. Ethan waited in the living room, the pocket watch on the coffee table between them, a silent witness to the reunion of three lives fractured by one man's fear. Victor came to see both of us, Ethan explained after awkward greetings were exchanged. He's offering deals, but they're really ultimatums. He wants to control the narrative completely. Catherine's eyes never left Robert's face. He always did, even back then. What do you mean? Robert asked. Catherine took a deep breath. Victor came to see me after you left. Offered me money to disappear with the baby. Said you'd sent him. Her voice hardened with the memory. I knew it was a lie. For all your flaws, you wouldn't have done that. Ethan looked stunned. You never told me that. Some truths serve no purpose, Catherine replied. Until now. Robert sank into a chair, the weight of understanding crushing him. He's been manipulating all of us from the beginning. My leaving wasn't enough for him. He wanted to erase any connection I had. To you both. He looked at Catherine with painful clarity. He was in love with you. No, Catherine corrected sharply. He was obsessed with controlling you. I was just collateral damage, and now he's doing it again, using Ethan. Ethan leaned forward. We need a plan. By tomorrow morning, Victor expects one of us to betray the other. If neither of us does, he'll destroy us both, Robert finished. My career, your legal license. There's a third option, Catherine said quietly. We fight back, together. Robert and Ethan exchanged glances. Father and son united for the first time by a common enemy and a shared determination to protect what remained of their fractured family. Dawn broke over Manhattan as Robert, Catherine, and Ethan gathered in Caldwell Financial's boardroom. The space that had hosted countless high-stakes negotiations now witnessed its most important one, a family fighting for redemption against an enemy who knew all their weaknesses. Victor expects me at the board meeting in 1 hour, Robert explained, pointing to the files spread across the table. He's presenting evidence that I personally directed all the fraudulent practices he engineered. And he expects me to either publicly denounce you or face disbarment proceedings, Ethan added. Catherine studied both men, the son she'd raised and the man she'd once loved, seeing the same determination in their expressions. Victor's fatal flaw has always been his belief that he's the smartest person in any room, she observed. We need to use that against him, Robert nodded. I've spent the night reviewing everything. Victor was methodical, but he made one crucial mistake. He pulled out a document. This executive order authorizing the most questionable derivative structures, he forged my signature. Ethan examined it closely. It's good, but not perfect. The pressure points in the signature are wrong. How can you tell? Robert asked, impressed. I studied document authentication in law school, Ethan replied, but this alone isn't enough to stop him. No, Catherine agreed, but it's a start. What else do we have? Jessica Barnes arrived with additional files from Hansen and Brooks. The pattern is clear, she explained after reviewing the evidence. Victor created a separate reporting structure outside normal compliance channels. He deliberately compartmentalized information so no single person could see the full picture. Except him, Robert said grimly. The boardroom door opened as William Davis entered, looking wary. This is highly irregular, Ethan. Meeting with the primary target of our investigation before the settlement is finalized. I know, Ethan acknowledged, but there's something bigger happening. He gestured to the evidence. Victor Harrington has been manipulating everyone, including our firm. Davis listened skeptically at first, then with growing concern as they outlined Victor's scheme. This could compromise our entire case, he finally admitted. Not the case. Case itself, Robert assured him. The settlement stands, but we need your help to expose Victor without creating collateral damage. Davis considered this. What do you need? Your presence at the board meeting, Robert replied. As independent verification that the settlement is legitimate, not a cover-up. Davis checked his watch. I can do that. But Ethan remains recused from the case due to the conflict of interest. Agreed, Ethan said. My priority is stopping Victor now. As the board members assembled, Victor projected confidence, greeting each with practiced charm. He faltered momentarily when Robert entered, flanked by Catherine, Ethan, and William Davis. What's this? Victor recovered quickly. I wasn't aware we'd invited an audience to this meeting. The board chairman, Eleanor Richards, a formidable woman who'd navigated Wall Street's culture for 3 decades, looked equally surprised. Robert, perhaps you could explain. Certainly, Robert replied calmly. I've asked these individuals to join us because what we're discussing today extends beyond Caldwell Financial. It involves a coordinated attempt to manipulate both our company and the legal system. Victor's eyes narrowed. This is highly inappropriate. We're here to discuss your mismanagement and the fraudulent activities you've overseen. Eleanor studied the unexpected guests. "Mr. Davis, you're representing Hanson and Brooks in the lawsuit against us. Why are you here?" "To confirm that Caldwell Financial's settlement offer remains in place regardless of today's outcome," Davis replied. "And to make clear that our firm was unknowingly manipulated as part of a larger scheme." Victor's composure slipped slightly. "This is absurd. They're attempting to distract from Robert's culpability." "Perhaps we should review the evidence before making judgments," Eleanor suggested, her tone neutral but her gaze sharp. For the next hour, the boardroom became a battlefield of documents, testimonies, and revelations. Victor presented his carefully curated evidence of Robert's misdeeds, painting a damning picture of a CEO who had placed profits above ethics and legality. Then, Catherine stood. The board members looked confused by this stranger's intervention until she introduced herself. "I'm Catherine Maxwell. 25 years ago, I was in a relationship with Robert Caldwell." She paused, allowing the significance to register. "When I became pregnant, Robert made the decision to leave. What most of you don't know is that Victor Harrington visited me afterward, offering money to disappear, claiming Robert had sent him." Victor's face reddened. "This is preposterous. A personal matter with no relevance to today's issues." "It establishes pattern and motive," Ethan countered, the lawyer in him emerging. "Victor's obsession with controlling Robert's life and decisions spans decades. Robert took over, methodically dismantling Victor's narrative with evidence of forged signatures, manipulated reports, and the parallel financial structure Victor had created." The board members' expressions shifted from skepticism to concern to outrage. "The most damning evidence," Robert concluded, "is that Victor has been anonymously feeding information to Hanson and Brooks while simultaneously engineering the very practices they're suing us for." All eyes turned to Victor, whose confident facade had crumbled. "You can't prove any of this," he insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. "Actually, we can," Jessica said, producing a flash drive. "These are recordings of your meetings with my colleague at Hanson and Brooks. You were so careful about electronic communications, but apparently not about in-person conversations." The recording played, Victor's distinctive voice filling the room. "I need Caldwell destroyed completely. Make sure the evidence targets him. Personally, I've been positioning myself as the solution to the crisis for years." Silence fell when the recording ended. Eleanor Richards recovered first. "Mr. Harrington, I believe you should leave. Security will escort you out. The board will determine next steps regarding potential criminal charges." Victor stood, desperation replacing calculation in his eyes. "You're making a terrible mistake. Everything I did was for this company's benefit." Robert was weak, compromised by sentiment and regret. "That's where you've always been wrong, Victor," Robert replied quietly. "What you saw as weakness was humanity, something you never understood." As security led Victor away, his final glare encompassed all three of them, Robert, Catherine, and Ethan, the family he had spent decades trying to keep apart. The aftermath unfolded rapidly. The board accepted Robert's settlement proposal with Hanson and Brooks. Victor faced multiple investigations from the SEC, the Justice Department, and the New York Attorney General's office. His career and reputation were in ruins. For Robert, the professional victory felt hollow compared to the personal reconciliation that remained uncertain. The board had retained him as CEO, but with enhanced oversight and a mandate to reform the company's practices completely. 3 days after the confrontation, he sat alone in his office when Catherine appeared in his doorway. They hadn't spoken since the board meeting. "May I come in?" she asked. Robert nodded, suddenly nervous in a way no business negotiation had ever made him feel. Catherine studied the view from his window. "Quite a perspective up here. It can make you forget what's happening on the ground," Robert admitted. "I spent too many years looking down from heights like this, missing what really mattered." She turned to face him. "Why did you keep that letter instead of sending it to me?" Robert's throat tightened. Fear. Pride. The longer I waited, the harder it became. Eventually, I convinced myself it was better for you both if I stayed away. He met her gaze directly. "I was wrong." "Yes, you were," Catherine agreed, but without the anger he expected. "You missed watching an extraordinary young man grow up." "I know," Robert said simply. "I can never get that back." Catherine's expression softened slightly. "No, but the future remains unwritten." She explained that Ethan had accepted a position with the Attorney General's office, using his experience to pursue financial fraud cases. His career had survived Victor's attempts to destroy it, though the revelation of his connection to Robert had created challenges he was still navigating. "He's having dinner at my place tonight," Catherine said casually. "Around 7. Robert understood the implicit invitation. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself," Catherine replied, "and perhaps the courage you lacked 25 years. Go." That evening, in Catherine's warm Park Slope brownstone, 3 people sat down to a simple meal. The conversation was awkward at first, years of absence and hurt, creating barriers not easily dismantled. "I can't pretend the past didn't happen," Ethan said finally, addressing the tension directly. "I grew up with a void where a father should have been." Robert nodded, accepting the truth of it. "I'm not asking you to forget or even forgive. Just for the chance to know you now, if you're willing." Ethan considered this as he turned the pocket watch in his hands, the legacy that had unexpectedly brought them together. The inscription says, "Time reveals truth, choose wisely." He glanced at his mother, then back at Robert. "I think it's time we all chose something better than the past has offered us." Catherine reached across the table, taking Robert's hand. In her left and Ethan's in her right. A bridge between father and son, between past and future. "Victor spent 25 years trying to keep us apart," she said. "Maybe the best revenge is not giving him another day of that victory." Over dessert, the tension gradually eased. Robert listened, humbled, as Catherine recounted stories of Ethan's childhood, his first steps, his academic achievements, his principled stance even as a boy. Stories that should have been Robert's memories as well. "I want you to know," Robert said at last, "that while I can't change what happened, I plan to spend whatever time I have left trying to be worthy of both of you." He hesitated, then continued. "The settlement money, I'm matching it personally, creating a foundation to help single parents pursuing education and careers. I'd like you both to help guide it." Ethan's expression remained guarded, but something shifted in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or the first fragile seedling of trust. As the evening drew to a close, Robert prepared to leave. At the door, he paused, facing Catherine. "Thank you," he said simply, "for raising an extraordinary son, for being stronger than I was." Catherine studied him, seeing the young banker she'd once loved, now tempered by age and regret. "We can't go back, Robert." "I know," he replied, "but perhaps we can go forward differently this time." 3 months later, Robert stood at the podium of a community center in Brooklyn, announcing the Maxwell Caldwell Foundation's first round of scholarships for single parents. Catherine and Ethan stood beside him, not as a reunited family in the traditional sense, but as partners in something new and meaningful. The pocket watch rested in Ethan's suit pocket, no longer a symbol of abandonment, but of connections that endured despite time and distance. Later, as they shared coffee, in Catherine's design studio, Robert watched his son's animated discussion with a scholarship recipient. Pride swelled in him, not for what he had done, but for who Ethan had become without him. "He has your determination," Catherine observed, following his gaze. "But he got his moral compass from you too, ironically. The you that existed before. Ambition took over." "I'm still finding my way back to that person," Robert admitted. Catherine's smile held the wisdom of years lived authentically. "That's the thing about paths, Robert. Sometimes the longest route teaches us what we need to know for the journey ahead." Across the room, Ethan caught their exchange and approached. "Everything okay?" "Just reflecting on journeys," Catherine replied. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about that too." He hesitated before continuing. "The Attorney General has asked me to lead a new financial crimes task force. I could use someone with insider knowledge of how Wall Street really works." Robert understood the olive branch being extended. "I'd be honored to help if you'll have me." "It won't be easy," Ethan warned. "We'd be challenging practices you once profited from." "Good," Robert replied with genuine conviction. "It's time." as they left together, father and son walking side by side for perhaps the first time. Catherine watched from the doorway. The pocket watch that had witnessed their separation now marked the beginning of a different kind of time, not erasing the past, but allowing the future to tell a new story. The inscription had proven prophetic after all. Time reveals truth. Choose wisely. And finally, they all had. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope you've been moved by Robert, Catherine, and Ethan's journey of reconciliation and redemption. Life rarely gives us perfect endings, but sometimes it offers second chances if we're brave enough to take them. For more emotionally powerful stories that explore the complexities of family, forgiveness, and finding your way home, check out our special playlist by clicking on the link to your left. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day we bring you unique stories that examine life's most profound challenges and connections. Don't miss our upcoming content, and please,